You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network and the mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. This is your Trojan Huddle, your USC Trojans edition, as we prepare for the Cotton Bowl down in Dallas on December 2nd as your USC Trojans take on the Tulane. What is it, Jamal? Mighty Wave? Green Wave?
Green Wave, baby. Green Wave.
Green Wave, that seafoam green. And we're going to get all into it previewing this game. We've had a lot to talk about prior to this game with the Heisman, with the transfer portal, with recruitment day. And so now we can finally talk about the last game of the season for this 2022 USC Trojan squad. So show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Once again, that's betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Go ahead and throw some money down on this USC Trojans game and hopefully win some heading into the new year. But I'm Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the madman, Jamal Madney. What is up, my brother? Happy almost New Year. And how excited are you for this final game of our Trojans?
Excited, Ryan, and happy holidays to you and all of our listeners, of course. And look, the last time SC was on the field, Ryan, we were there up in the press box in Allegiant. The game didn't go exactly as planned, and it feels like it's been a year since that's happened. Kind of the aftermath of that game. Caleb Williams wins the Heisman. We have all of these gets in terms of the transfer portal from Dorian Singer to Mason Cobb. We lose out on Mateo Uliungalale. We have other transfers in Goforth going to Washington. So just feels like we've lived 11 lives since the last time the Trojans took the field. So excited to see this USC team finish year one of the Lincoln Riley era in the right way, in an emphatic way, and just excited to see the product on the field after so much of the narrative over the last month has obviously been off the field stuff.
Yeah, I think with past USC teams and even just other teams in general, I'd be a little worried about this game just being kind of a letdown after, losing the conference title, having a shot at the football playoff, which would then go on to a shot at the college football national championship, which is being held right here in Los Angeles at SoFi. And so I would be concerned about that. Like, oh man, like what a huge letdown now having to face, no disrespect, but facing a Tulane team in the Cotton Bowl. But I think just because of the culture that Lincoln Riley has built so quickly with this program and the fact that, which we'll get into all these players, but the fact that the bulk of all these players are playing in this game, are excited about it, want to end it the right way. They've been down in Dallas already. We're credentialed for this game. So we've been getting all the reports and pictures and photos of this team doing, children's hospital visits and outings and events down in Dallas. So they're there excited for this game. And so I think I'm excited for this game, and I feel really confident about this team, even with some of the guys not playing, which I'll just mention now. No Voorhees, no Nealon, which was expected, both being injured. Voorhees probably could have played after missing the last 2 games of the season, and then now having a month, but he's going to stay out. And then no Jordan Addison, the great receiver who is declaring for the draft. But other than that, and I should say no Ralen Goforth, who hit the transfer portal in terms of starters. That's basically it. Caleb Williams on track to play as of this recording. We haven't heard officially. He is officially the starter, but I think all indications are that he will play. He will start. And so we talked about it, Jamal, in our UCLA segment, how Chip Kelly has built a culture and a program that has his guys excited to play in this bowl game. DTR, Charbonnet, Jake Bobo, all the starters are going to play in a culture now where you see a lot of college athletes opt out. I mean, I mentioned it on that segment, but you have Jackson Smith and Jigbo with the Ohio State Buckeyes who are playing in the college football playoff, and he's sitting out for the NFL draft. And so this is UCLA and the Sun Bowl guys playing, and now you have USC who are in the Cotton Bowl. And the fact that they all primarily want to play in this game, I think, shows the culture that Lincoln Riley's built, and it makes me really excited to watch this game. And especially since it's been a month since we've seen this play, I'm excited to see all these guys get out there and hopefully end the season off with their 12th win.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree with you for the most part there. It would have been nice to see Addison play. It would have been nice to see Voorhees play to really feel like that culture is completely there. But I totally agree with you. I think Lincoln is steering the ship in the right direction. And as long as Lincoln and Caleb are on the same page really at USC, the other guys are going to fall in line. I don't think the culture goes 44 deep or 88 deep. I think the culture is coach and quarterback. And when they're in lockstep, I think everyone else follows suit. And Caleb, the tremendous leader that he is, leading by example, wants to get out there and play. So I'm excited to see him cap off his Heisman year the right way. Ryan, I'm worried about this game, to be very honest with you. I think the odds makers sort of agree with USC only being a 2-point favorite here. This is sort of that classic trap bowl game. We've seen it over the years in college football when a group of 5 team plays a Power 5 team, and that Power 5 team is sort of viewing this bowl game as a consolation prize of sorts. And I'm not saying that USC mentally or culturally is feeling that way, but the reality is the reality that had they beaten Utah, they'd be in the playoff right now, and the loss so it is now sending them to the Cotton Bowl. So it is a bit of a step down. And we've seen this even with Alabama teams. We saw this with Georgia a couple of years ago. We've seen this with a number of teams. These group of 5 teams come, treat it like their national championship, like their Super Bowl, the way UCF did, the way Cincinnati did, the way Boise State has over the years. And when you have sort of a Power 5 team that's not necessarily sleepwalking, but maybe doesn't have their A-plus intensity, it really sets up for a very compelling game and oftentimes an upset. For me, my concern right now is sort of twofold. One is only 3 guys on offense are going to be missing from this game, but there's such 3 vital pieces. When you talk about 2/5 of the offensive line and the 2 best offensive linemen for USC, and when you couple that with Caleb recovering from an injury, that feels like a recipe for some trouble and some friction of where is Caleb's mobility going to be and where does it need to be, given he's without his 2 best offensive linemen, and then he's without his ultimate security blanket in Jordan Addison. And while USC was able to survive the likes of Arizona, the likes of Cal, the likes of Colorado without Addison, courtesy of the greatness of Caleb Williams, you could clearly see there was a difference, a step function difference in how the offense operated. And Tulane is better than those 3 teams. And so when you sort of couple that injury dynamic with the fact that you have arguably one of the most underrated coaches in all of college football in Willie Fritz, you have a 3-year starter at quarterback in Michael Pratt, who threw for over 2,700 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, 5-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, and a bell cow in Tyjae Spears, 5'10", 195, who was, 1,400 yards rushing, 6.5 yards per carry, 15 touchdowns, and built much in the same way of some of these Pac-12 running backs that have given USC trouble all year long. This has the makings to be a very compelling and close game. So I'm really excited to see USC, but I'm really excited to see their mindset about how intense they're going to be, because Tulane, this is a program-defining game for Tulane. This is arguably the biggest game in Tulane football history, and certainly the biggest game of the last 50 years for Tulane, and they're going to come out that way versus this being just kind of another bowl game, another, New Year's Six bowl game for SC. Let's see how that emotional disparity sort of plays out on the field.
Yeah, and just to double click on some of that, you mentioned Tyjae Spears, who's had a phenomenal season, and 120 yards in each of his last 7 games. Yeah. And we know how this USC defense has been against the run, has not been great. Utah ran all over them, obviously, in that Pac-12 championship game. So they're definitely going to have their work cut out for them. And with no Ralen Goforth, who starting linebacker and has been fundamentally sound against the run, at least in terms of how the rest of the team has been. He's been one of their top guys, so they're going to have their hands full with him. You mentioned Michael Pratt. I think the big stat with him, only 5 interceptions. And when you look at this USC defense giving up a lot of yards, but being very opportunistic in the turnover game, and facing a guy now, a running back that doesn't fumble the ball and a quarterback that doesn't throw interceptions, it's a perfect recipe for Tulane and a very tough and tall order for USC and company to kind of force those turnovers. So I'm going to be really excited to see what, Coach Grinch dials up in terms of pass rush and in terms of blitzes and in terms of schemes and different stunts to kind of throw their quarterback, off his rhythm and maybe force some ill-timed turnovers that he didn't have throughout the season. So that's going to be a real big key to watch on defense, is how they make the quarterback uncomfortable so they can force some of those and get Bullock having those kind of easy center fielder interceptions that we saw throughout the year. And that comes from the pass rush and plugging up those throwing lanes that make it difficult for the quarterback to see. And then finally, you mentioned Willie Fritz, who I could be incorrect in this, but I don't think I am, in voting came up only second in coach of the year to Sonny Dykes at TCU. Tulane, for those who don't know, I know you know, Tulane was a 2-win program last year. 2 wins at Tulane, and you turn Tulane, not a powerhouse, into an 11-win program that finishes the season ranked in the top 18. That is an impressive coaching job. And I think you having this game just for this season, I'm not saying like overall, I think Lincoln Riley is definitely a better coach overall, but in terms of this season and output and production and turnaround of program, you have between Lincoln Riley and the Tulane coach, probably 2 of the top 3 coaches in all of college football. And then you can add Sonny Dykes, what he did at TCU as well. And then, obviously we saw some great stuff in the Pac-12 because, Lincoln Riley didn't even win coach of the year, which we had a conversation about earlier. So, this Tulane squad, I still feel very confident, like I said earlier, but you're absolutely right. This is a very good Tulane squad. And I don't think just because they're a mid-major, or not a mid-major, but they're not a Power 5, people should sleep on them and think this is just going to be a blowout. And there's been a big trend, Jamal, lately of non-Power 5 schools really upsetting Power 5 programs in bowl games. And this has that written all over it. I just feel confident enough in Caleb Williams and what he's able to do, and Lincoln Riley and the culture they've built. But this will certainly not be an easy game. I definitely don't think it'll be a blowout game. And it actually will probably be one of the more exciting New Year's 6 games that we have on the slate, which a lot of people might not have circled when you look at, a USC team that lost the title game and a Tulane team that's not a Power 5, but it may be like that Oklahoma Boise State game from whatever that was a decade ago that ended up being one of the best Fiesta Bowls we've ever witnessed. It could have very similar vibes. So you kind of broke down everything perfectly about Tulane, but how do you see this game going? Do you see it being an offensive back and forth game, that it's going to be a 45-42 kind of a game? Do you see it being very different and the defense getting some stops? How do you kind of see this thing going down in your head?
Yeah, Ryan, I think it's a great question. I mean, one of the key elements here is that there's also a recent history between Willie Fritz and Lincoln Riley. Tulane played Oklahoma last September of 2021 in Norman. And Tulane played Oklahoma very tough for about a quarter and a half, almost leading into halftime. That was a game that Tulane took an early lead in. That game was tied for the better part of the first half. And then Oklahoma's talent ultimately pulled away at the end of that first half, and they were able to create some separation, but Tulane was able to hang tough in that game. So there's familiarity between Willie Fritz and Lincoln Riley. And by no means is Willie Fritz going to be intimidated by Lincoln Riley in any way, shape, or form. Ryan, I don't see this game being the ultimate shootout, but I see this game being close. I could see Tulane get off to a bit of a quick start with this sort of gap, right? I mean, whenever you go 30, 35 days in between games, there's really an opportunity to script things and script the first drive, the first couple drives, the first quarter. And Willie Fritz is great at that. He's one of the great scripters in all of college football. So I could see Tulane kind of jump out 7-3, 10-3, 10-7 into the first quarter, and then USC starting to settle in and then ultimately put a couple of drives together to take a lead. But then Tulane continuously answering and staying within striking distance over the course of this game. I think that USC is going to do USC things on offense. But again, in these big games, in these hostile environments, Caleb Williams relied so heavily on Jordan Addison in these critical situations. I think back to the UCLA game where Addison looked like arguably the best player on the field that night. I think back to the first Utah game where after Addison got hurt, there was a noticeable drop-off in the offense with the exception of that screen pass to Michael Jackson III. So I think that SC is going to score their points, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I think Austin Jones is going to be the X factor here. I look for Austin Jones to be near 150 yards rushing in this game and really sort of alleviating some of that pressure. But I think it's going to be a close game through and through. SC's always going to have the lead. They're never going to be quite threatened, but I think it's going to be a tight one. I like SC 38-31 in this game. They're not going to win by double figures, but they are going to cover considering they're only a 2-point favorite.
There you go. Yeah, should definitely cover if they win. But yeah, what's crazy, Jamal, and we've had these talks, and it's all just, people's opinion and whatnot, but you could make the argument. Like, you could really dive into the stats and make the argument that Tulane has a better resume than Ohio State in terms of, obviously they have one more loss, but in terms of they beat Kansas State, who obviously, won the Big 12. They have wins over East Carolina, who just, had a big bowl game win. They have wins over Cincinnati. They have wins over Memphis, who just had a big bowl game win as well. So, I mean, they have a very solid resume and have put together a really, really good, powerful program that I think is going to definitely have some difficulties for USC. And we've talked a lot about the Tulane offense and the key players to do a lot, but Tulane's got a very, very strong defense, and they really eat in the secondary, which is obviously what USC is going to want to do with Caleb Williams in this passing attack. So USC is going to also have to be very careful on offense not to turn the ball over. We talked about what is Alex Grinch going to dial up on defense to kind of disguise things and make Tulane uncomfortable, so they kind of force some errant throws and force some turnovers. But I think Tulane's going to do the very same thing, especially Caleb. I don't think he'll be 100%, even though he's going to play in this one. He'll probably be closer to that 85, 90%. And will he force things? And he hasn't done so all year. Obviously, only 3-4 picks total in the entire season. So has been very, very good with the football. But this is a game where that's going to be, they've had a month to prepare. They watched a lot of tape. They see what Caleb does, and there's no way to really fully stop Caleb because of how athletic he is. But if he's not 100% with his legs, then let's see how he can be in that pocket. And to double down on that, I want to see Lincoln Riley kind of not put so much pressure on Caleb Williams, knowing that his quarterback has carried this team since day one and carried this team on one leg to be even competitive in that Utah game. So now, and obviously it's tough on the fly when your quarterback on the third play of the game pops his hammy and all of a sudden isn't the same guy. It's hard to completely change the game plan in game. But now with a month to prepare, I'm really excited, really curious, and just really looking forward to seeing what Lincoln Riley dials up to maybe not force Caleb to be so mobile and kind of get the ball out quick. As you mentioned, use Austin Jones in not just the running game, but also in the passing game. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more from the other backs. Darwin Barlow has had some good carries here and there, just sparingly. Maybe we'll see him more involved and see some of this screen game so that we can get Caleb not getting hit and getting things out and not forcing him to be the magic man outside of the pocket and running for his life and having these amazing highlight runs. But you don't want to see that on the hammy, and you want him to be fully healthy going in the next season as well. Because obviously, as great as this game is going to be, as good as it will be for USC to be back in a New Year's Six bowl game and hopefully bring home a New Year's Six bowl trophy to USC's campus, the goal is still national championships. And that doesn't happen next year if Caleb Williams is not 100% going into the year. So we don't want anything to happen in this game where he's running for his life and makes anything that's going to linger for the next 9 or so months for next season. But I do have USC winning as well. I think they do pull off a good win. 38-31 is what you said, correct?
Yep.
I like that. I'll go 35-28. Real simple score. All touchdowns, 35-28. They win by 7. It'll be, a close game, back and forth game. It'll probably be, for SC fans, a real nerve-wracking game because you'll see, like you mentioned, maybe Tulane jumps off early or they keep it tied late. But I think the greatness of Caleb will ultimately shine at the end there and they get the job done. So what does a game like this, Jamal, to kind of wrap this up, mean for this program heading into next year?
Ryan, I don't know if it means too much, to be honest with you. I think that it's really, I think job one is to make sure that Caleb is healthy moving forward. I think that's job one, because I think what it means more for individual players than it means, I think, for the program. I think just being here and having the 11-2 season to this point, I think has established Lincoln Riley's year one as being very successful. I think what I'm looking for is a Tahj Washington having a big game in this potentially, a Kyle Ford having a big game in this potentially, a Brenden Rice having a big game, because it makes those guys have even greater confidence going into next year when they're going to play a bigger role. The Gentry's having a big game, the Shane Lees, the Bullocks. So I'm looking more at individuals having now some credible bowl experience, playing really well in bowl games, and then stepping into those leadership roles next year where you want more. I think from a program perspective, this game means so much more to Tulane than it does to SC. And I think Ryan, it's going to be a tight game that you mentioned. This is going to be SC's 6th game against a ranked opponent. They're 3-2. Obviously, the 2 losses against Utah, the 3-point win against Oregon State, the 3-point win against UCLA, and then the 11-point win against Notre Dame. So it's going to be tight. That's sort of been the history of USC against ranked opponents. And so looking for the stars of next year to really play a big role to propel them over the top. And the last thing, Ryan, I will say is I'm really looking for the twitch ability of Caleb Williams, because that's what makes him so special. It's making that one move, that one jerk to sort of evade the rush, to buy more time, to then be able to do more things. He lost that completely with that hamstring against Utah. They could just tee up on him. And so the degree in which he can make that first guy miss, the first over pursuer miss, and have those pass rushers sort of hesitate a little bit to get to him because they know he can move, that's what creates the magic of Caleb. If you can straight line pass rush him because of injury, changes the whole complexion of the game. So we'll know exactly what kind of Caleb we have within the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game. And I think that's going to set up for a very compelling narrative in the final 3.5 quarters.
Should be a blast. We may be down in Dallas. Like I said, we are credentialed, so we may be at Jerry World in the box, bringing you live coverage of this game on the LA Football Network. So that's all the time we got. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. USC Trojan Huddle. This is the LA Football Show for Jamal Madney. I am Ryan Dyrud. Enjoy the game. Happy New Year, everyone. Can't wait to talk to you all in 2023.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.